Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. As part of a comprehensive news analysis today, we'll be discussing very interesting 7 topics. But before we begin, as always, after the session, there's a Telegram quiz for you out of the topics which we've discussed today. And the topics which we are going to discuss today are quite diverse in their coverage. So the first topic we'll discuss the universal health coverage concept, how we need to change it. Thereafter, we have India and China border tranquility, the concept that we need to change our approach towards China, and generally it's an interesting article talking about how we can change our approach towards China. Thereafter, a very interesting survey of the NSS, and it gives us very shocking results when it comes to basic indicators of India generally and tells us the ground reality in that sense. Thereafter, a new section which we've added. It's been a while, but it's good to see you all again and good morning. The fact is, Prelims Bytes, these are topics which are not as big as a mains topic, but generally important for your prelims examination. So we'll talk about a very unfortunate reality, which is very low budgetary allocation to art and culture. Thereafter, a concept of radiation, that to nuclear radiation in Kerala because of the monazite sand there. Thereafter, Putin visiting the occupied parts of Ukraine, a very interesting and important development before the Chinese premier is coming to Russia. And the last but not the least, a very important scheme which is common to Karnataka and UP both, a very interesting development where we are trying to bring in grassroots level reality together and all these schemes together in that sense. So an interesting set of 7 topics, and I hope that you will be able to understand. The standard structure is going to be the same. I'll give you a basic understanding of the article, then we'll go into the nitty-gritty itself, and then we'll revise in the same session before we look at the mains question. Now, the first topic. The first article, it's an editorial. It's the concept of universal health coverage. And why is this topic important for you is not because of the definitional aspect, because it refers to a lot of declarations, it refers to a lot of different concepts which we technically don't give a lot of attention to. So what is universal health coverage? The concept is that you do not discriminate against anybody according to the concept of what we call as health. Health is something which should be universally accessible to everybody, and the basic point is there will be always haves and have-nots, there will be always be rich and poor, and therefore accessibility to health should always be based on equality and equity. However, that is technically not the case. And what this article is technically trying to talk about is that we need to change our approach and definition of universal health coverage, because we are not discussing them in the larger context of integrated approach. Rather, what we are trying to understand basically is giving certain access to certain people. And there's a concept of primary, secondary and tertiary, which I'm going to discuss with you. So, before we go into the nitty-gritty, we'll go into the definitional aspects later, which is how does the WHO define health and the concept of universal health coverage. See, there are 3 basic stages of health coverage or health-based institutions: primary, secondary and tertiary. Primary generally is what you see at your basic block level or in your villages at the grassroots level. Secondary would be a major hospital in the district, and tertiary would be very big hospitals such as AIIMS in major metropolitan cities. So there's a concept of basic primary health, thereafter a little bit of specialization at secondary, and super speciality at the tertiary level. Now, there is a lot of conventions which exist, but there's a one convention which is based in 1978, which is called the Alma Ata Declaration, and that is considered WHO's basic mandate to governments how they need to cover health coverage. So this Alma Ata, or International Conference on Primary Health Care, is basically a very interesting conference which said that, okay, let us define the role of the state. What is the role of the state when it comes to healthcare generally? And under this declaration, and this is a very interesting point, you need to remember this point, the concept was that primary health should be governmental, and once government has made sure that primary district level basic care in which there is no what we call as chronic or non-communicable disease, basic health indicators, basic health institutions should be maintained by the government, and thereafter secondary and tertiary should be left to the private sector, or generally the governmental intervention should be less. Now, if you look at the larger context of how things work, this means that when it comes to expensive or very specific type of medicine, secondary and tertiary is technically under private. And we all know through our experiences and what is happening today is that this is a very, very discriminatory concept, because when it comes to major chronic diseases, which could be mental health, neuro, even cardio, the poor don't have access to tertiary and secondary because of the fact that it is based on expensive insurance-based coverage. Therefore, this declaration defines that only the primary level should be managed by the government. Thereafter, secondary, tertiary should not be under neither the governmental approach or should be under governmental institutions. Basic intervention, no major intervention. Now, this in itself looks like a capitalist intervention into the concept of health, that health should not be dictated by the state. However, this only creates the concept of health as a discriminatory practice. And therefore, this article tends to talk about how we need to move beyond this concept of Alma Ata declaration, which is that primary is only the concern of the government, not the secondary and the tertiary. And therefore, there are certain approaches which have developed over a period of time. And today, the model which is there is basically the concept of multi-nodal or multimodal concept of health, where you have one major scheme and there are schemes attached to it. India follows this scheme. However, the author, the editor technically tries to talk about the fact that we need to bring sanitation, water, employment, health, education, all together. So when we talk about primary, and I'm repeating myself, when we talk about primary, which is basic healthcare at the block or at the village level, at the lowest grassroots level, governmental intervention is considered to be good, and the only role the government should have under a WHO larger agreement or a mandate which the WHO gives to all governments. On the other hand, secondary and tertiary would be not super specialty, basic level of specialty, maybe has a cardio or neuro, which is secondary, a major hospital in a district, and then super specialty hospitals such as AIIMS would be tertiary. The second and third level are about major diseases which cannot be managed through primary. So the concept was that the WHO said the role of the state is not there in the secondary and the tertiary, primary it is there. So we need to change this concept, and this is the basic point of this article, and we'll go about like this only, that I'll tell you the basic point of the article and then we'll go into the nitty-gritty. The basic point here is that there is a certain agreement between states, there's a certain agreement and understanding which has been given by the WHO, and that only says that primary is the zone of the government, everything else is technically the zone of the private. And then it comes to private, equity cannot be expected because people don't have insurance coverage, people don't have understanding of what technically secondary and tertiary is, and more than that, they don't have the money or the resources to go for super speciality or very major form of treatment in that sense. So the concept, very simple, it is now important for you for the mains examination and generally that you know this declaration. So let's talk about it. See, the WHO defines health as a certain totality of health to the realms of mental, social well-being and happiness beyond physical fitness and the absence of disease and disability. This is the correct definition or the basic definition of what we call as health. Health, good health, this is how WHO defines it. Now, under universal health coverage, this word was very, very important in the 1780s, 90s, but now the 70s, 80s, this period, a lot of discussion about this. Now there's no real discussion about universal health, but we need to change and reconceptualize it. So it says nobody is denied and everyone is eligible without being discriminated on the basis of financial status, gender, race, place or residence, affordability. Now this concept is something which every welfare state or generally India tries to embody, that we want to give health for all. Health for all is based on no discrimination. It's a fundamental right. It's a right which we have generally under life and liberty, that health should be something in which we don't discriminate against. However, the WHO mandate is not similar to this. The WHO mandate, which comes through the International Conference on Primary Health Care and the Alma-Ata Declaration of 1978, it says any non-communicable disease, chronic disease, such as mental illness and its investigation were excluded from primary health care. Now this is where things start to become complicated, wherein you talk about non-discrimination, but when you're talking about non-discrimination, you are also talking about only primary. And this is technically a problematic aspect of this WHO declaration and this general understanding between states, because primary would mean what? General physician, cough, cold, flu, vaccination maximum. However, the secondary and tertiary, in the way we live today because of pollution, because of the way private sector is polluting the water, the air, there is a lot of complication which everybody starts to develop. Now, if you don't give access to people at the secondary or tertiary level through governmental institutions which are free or universally accessible to everybody, then you are creating a concept of universal health coverage which is technically not universal. Therefore, there are not enough governmental run institutions for the poor generally because of this understanding. Now, this is where the article is technically trying to urge the policymakers to abandon this concept, that we should not discriminate against this concept of primary, tertiary and secondary. We need to go beyond this and create a regime which is better than what has been the basic agreement as of right now. So this abdication is to give up, abdication of responsibility, which is that the government says, according to the WHO general agreement between states, primary is the zone of the government, secondary and tertiary is not the zone of the government. Therefore, it puts everybody at risk, because you and me then go into this private zone, which is unregulated, which is based on a lot of profiteering and is based on this insurance concept. The problem is not as chronic as in America, because in America, the insurance regime is extremely problematic. In India, people don't have insurance coverage generally, but in America, the same basic concept, basic medicine is very expensive because of the insurance concept. However, in India, insurance coverage as it is not more than 6 to 7%. The basic point of the matter is that in India, what is happening is we are exposing our poor, our vulnerable sections to a lot of profiteering and a lot of different forces which only want to exploit the poor. Therefore, what this article is technically trying to talk about is that we need to go for a new concept. A new concept which goes beyond this concept of primary, secondary and tertiary, goes beyond the concept of the Alma-Ata Declaration. And we need to bring in a synergy, a close connection between all forms, because health is not an isolated indicator. Health is connected to education, health is connected to employment, health is connected to generally water, is related to sanitation. Everything needs to come together. Therefore, we need to go beyond this concept of Alma-Ata and now encompass primary, secondary and tertiary, and need to create an affordable system which does not discriminate. Now, this is the contradiction which this article is trying to talk about. I'm trying to push this concept to you multiple times because this article is not giving us a solution. It's giving us a problem. And this is how you read the newspaper. Certain articles tell you solutions, certain articles tell you problems. This article is technically telling you the problem. The problem is the conceptualization of universal health coverage, the concept of how we are discriminating, though we don't have a regime which wants to discriminate. Therefore, there are two major new understandings which have emerged. One in 2011, the other one in 2012. And we can now technically move towards them rather than holding on to alma alta. Therefore, countries have urged that the financial aspect of healthcare sector should make sure that the out-of-pocket expense and major expenditure on health for the impoverished families should be minimized. But this is better said than done. And more than that, what India is now following, and this is the future also, is a multi-nodal system of varied sectors where different professionals are meeting at one point. And herein comes our concept of National Health Mission, wherein we are bringing in Poshan Abhiyan, National Food Security, the Manrega, Water Sanitation, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, everything together. Because we have tried to create this regime in which we are not confined to one basic system, but schemes coming together in a multi-nodal. Nodal means that there are different nodes which are connected to one basic point. Now, this is the National Health Mission. And thereafter, 4 different points coming together and bringing education, sanitation, water, nutrition, everything together under this concept. Now, basic point, before I move on to the next article itself, what is this article trying to talk about? This article is pointing out 3 basic things. First, that basically the concept of universal health coverage has got corrupted, and this abdication of responsibility by the government, saying that the Alma Ata Declaration says that the primary sector is the zone of the government. Not acceptable. Second, it is trying to point out the contradiction in this concept itself, that basically we are talking about non-discrimination, but we have created a private sector which discriminates, which creates a lot of predatory and what we call as exploitative practices. And over and above that, the problem generally is that we need to reconceptualize our understanding. And there's a mains question in the end for this, but the reconceptualization needs to be based on the concept that out-of-pocket expenditure needs to go down. And second and more important is that there needs to be a intersectionality in schemes. So I hope that you understand the basic point. You are getting this basic point, that what is the article trying to talk about? Everybody, come on. Then we move on to the next one. Yes? Great. Perfect. So, with this, Alma Ata Declaration is by the WHO. It's an agreement between close to 190 countries. Okay. Now we move on to India-China. India-China perpetual issue. Unlike with Pakistan, where we have a properly legally binding line, which is the LOC, here there's an agreement between 2 countries which is called the LAC, the line of actual control. Now, what this article is technically trying to talk about is, unlike other articles which try to instigate, it's talking about how diplomacy has been able to make sure that we have now created a new type of modus vivendi. Now, this is a very important word generally for your vocabulary. That is why reading the newspaper is important. What does modus vivendi mean? Modus vivendi means that 2 conflicting parties have now agreed to come to a basic agreement how to coexist. And though there are irritants, though China itself is an aggressive power, it is trying to change the basic modus operandi. The basic problem is that we have aggression from China. We have always tried to make sure that the LAC remains and still is the basic line of control. However, this article tries to talk about that we have actually made sure that their aggression or their violence has been undercut by diplomacy. And it gives a solution, and this is a solution giving article, that is why it becomes important for the mains examination. It gives a solution which is being worked out by India and China for quite a long time now, and we are now on the verge of getting that solution. And the basic point of the matter is, out of the 6 sectors in Ladakh where we had a major conflict with China over the LAC, 4 have been technically controlled. 4, there is a lot of agreement in 4. So basically, we have Karakoram Pass, Daulat Beg Oldi. Thereafter, we have Gogra, we have Pongangso, and we have the Galwan Valley and Hot Spring PP15. Now, what the article is technically trying to talk about is that we have disengagement in 4 sectors out of the 6, be it Galwan, Pongangso, Gogra and Jijana Pass, which is technically PP15, which is this hot spring. However, there are 2 areas in which we still have a problem. And these 2 areas would be the Depsang Bulge and the Charding Ninglung Junction, which is Demchok area of the Ladakh sector itself. And we need a solution for this area. Though Pangangso from time to time they're building a bridge, there is a lot of issues when it comes to the Chinese trying to push and trying to be on the higher ground, and they are trying to do that in the Ladakh sector quite a lot. But the basic point of the matter is that we have diplomatically resolved out of the 6, at least 4. We found a solution where there is no violence in out of these 4, though there was a lot of escalation in the previous decade. It's at 2012, 2013, 2020, last major clash in this sector. However, what the solution it is technically giving, and this is a very important concept for you because these type of questions come in GS paper 2, is that it is saying that in the 4 sectors where we have agreement, we have what are called posts or outposts, and we have what we call as patrolling. We have patrolling. We can patrol these 4 sectors because there's a basic agreement where that line is. However, in the 2 sectors where there is no clarity, and this is where China tries to push the boundaries too much, where there's no basic clarity, what the basic concept is emerging is that in those 2 sectors we will not have what we call as patrolling outposts. The argument is that both of the parties will move from that sector away and removing their outposts and not patrolling that sector itself. By not patrolling that sector, there will be no clashes, and in itself, it gives a temporary solution to these areas. Because what is happening right now is that there is aggression from the Chinese, they're trying to push, and there needs to be mutual agreement here. India is always ready. China needs to agree to this concept, and this has been in a lot of different conferences discussed, that in the 2 sectors, in the sectors we don't have agreement over, let us not patrol these sections. Because if we are patrolling, that is leading to conflict. And this is where comes the concept of modus vivendi, which is that we are agreeing to not have aggression or have conflict where we know there is already a dispute. Therefore, this is a unique solution. For the first time, we're seeing it coming out of a newspaper article, which is that there's a unique solution to this concept that wherever we have agreement, we patrol. We patrol, we have outposts, we man our basic concepts. However, where we do not have basic understanding or we don't have agreement, let us not create confrontation and let us remove the outpost and not patrol this sector. Maybe even have outposts but not patrol. Patrolling creates a lot of face-to-face interaction and therefore conflict, and we and India and China are trying to work this out diplomatically for sure. What is happening on the ground may be different and there's a whole different story in that regard. However, diplomatically this is a solution which they're trying to point out. So this is a basic point of this article, that it's trying to give a solution to an age-old issue now, that how do India and China come to an agreement over something they don't have basic agreement with and not clarity also, because LAC, as I said, is not a legally binding or a very well internationally defined line. In certain sectors, there is a lot of conflict and overlapping. So wherever there is overlapping, you don't patrol that section. Now, will it work, will it not work is a separate issue altogether. But when it comes to our understanding in the larger context of how we need to go forward, and if there are solutions which are being asked from you, this is one solution which this government has been pursuing for quite a long time. So I hope that you're able to understand the basic concept here. So let's go into the larger understanding by the nitty-gritties. So, India and China have generally come to an agreement with regards to the disputed territories out of the 6 in 4. So through patient negotiation, India has been able to find out a solution for Galwan, Pongangso, Gogra and the PP15 post. However, there are still 2 key areas where there is no agreement, and the basic point of the matter is how do we go forward? And herein comes the new solution which this article is technically trying to point out. And the new solution is converting other parts of the LAC in which there is no agreement into no patrol zones. Neither China can enter into areas which India disputes, or China and India cannot enter into areas where China is disputing. Therefore, we don't create confrontation. It is likely that the no patrol zone could be confined to the places where both have overlapping claims, and if this concept comes through, immediately 2 remaining areas, Depsang and Charding Nala, will technically automatically get resolved. So out of the 6, 4 we have solution, it's about the 2, and if we have this solution of no patrolling, as it is, conflict in the Ladakh sector will be over, though we'll be holding on to the LAC in that sense. The larger dispute of Aksai Chin remains. However, there will be no face-to-face confrontation on day-to-day basis. Therefore, though this solution is there, the major irritant is that China is one of those countries which always pushes the boundaries too much, and it has a shifting goalpost concept. Today it will say, okay, these 2 sectors are okay, then they will start to be aggressive in the other 4. And that is the major problem. The problem is that the lack of precision, this is the concept. See, the basic location where that line is not very well defined. And therefore, it is this lack of precision which China uses to keep India on its toes, and always tries to de-escalate this issue in that area, or tries to take strategic locations. Therefore, the Ladakh sector, though 5-6 years back it seemed that there could be a war between India and China over the Galwan Valley, or beat this whole sector, India has very strategically, and it is technically hats off to our diplomats, that through diplomatic channels it has been able to generally de-escalate in the major areas. However, the issue still remains is that there are 2 major sectors in which there is no agreement. Now, as I said, this is not a concept I am endorsing, this is not a concept you need to endorse, but this is a concept which is out there and is one solution which has been given for quite a long time. China has not agreed to it till this point. It has its own pros and cons, because India would also have to agree to not patrol this sector, and we know how the Chinese are when it comes to trust. So therefore, India is trying to move on. It believes that these disputed territories, these disputes technically takes India nowhere. Therefore, India's prosperity and new India can only be created when we concentrate on the things which matter. Now the basic point of the matter is, this is a solution which can be given, but never in the examination say this is the only solution. It is one of the solutions which is on the table and is being discussed quite a lot as of right now in different channels, in that sense that we go for no patrol zones. Please remember this word and your work is done. This is the basic point of this article. This is why we are discussing it in length. So I hope you understand this basic concept of no patrol zones and this solution. If this is clear, then we go to the third article, which is a very interesting one, which has a lot of new indicators which we can understand. Right? See, as I said, Chiku, the basic point of the matter is there are pros and cons. It can be good, it can be bad. The basic point of the matter is it's a diplomatic solution. China can actually exploit this basic agreement to move further also. And this is the basic point. We cannot always trust the Chinese. However, I'm not asking you to trust the Chinese, but the basic point of the matter is diplomacy has been able to find a solution for 4 of them. 2 are left. Now the basic point is we need a solution for that. Because see, war takes you nowhere. If you've studied world history, you know, be it First World War, Second World War, any war, Nobody is the victor in a war. Everybody fails. And therefore, war is not the solution. So if diplomacy technically gives you a basic concept, can it be implemented? Cannot be implemented? See, tenable, untenable. These are things which you and me don't decide. But the basic point is, as I said, I'm not saying this is the only solution. I'm saying this is one solution which is there in diplomatic channels. You don't have to push it as the ultimate solution. There are issues, as I said, pros and cons, but I'm trying to give you something to write in the mains examination. I hope you're getting my point. I'm not giving you the solution for these two areas. I'm technically giving you an alternative arrangement which can be used for a mains level examination when it comes to India and China, right? India, China, is there a solution? There's one solution, no patrol zones in certain areas. Perfect. We can move on. Now, a very interesting set of data which we find. Now, there was a survey which was done, the multiple indicator survey for 2020-21, NSS, the 78th round in that regard. And the basic point of the matter is that we tend to talk about certain things and we take it for granted. For example, tapped water, that there's a pipeline in your house that every time you open the tap, water comes. Second is that water as a resource, fresh water, is accessible within your house itself. Now, you don't have to go somewhere to get water. It is accessible in your house. Third, the basic concept of ACs. For example, nowadays we believe that AC is something which we can't live without. But if you look at the basic data, you will be shocked at how big is the coverage for ACs. Thereafter, how willing are people to move for employment? And these are the questions which this survey has technically asked people. There's one indicator which is more telling, which is the concept of clean energy. For example, we have been talking about Ujala, we were talking about schemes which are trying to give the gas, LPG to women, to the rural household. But on the grassroots level, we are seeing that there's still a gap because there's a sizable portion in certain states, close to 50%, where people are still using traditional chulhas and what we call as wood or biomass as the form of fuel. Now, what do you do with this information? Obviously, you technically don't fully go and write all of this in the examination. I'm giving you this basic data to be used in GS paper 3 or 2 or in essay paper, where we tend to believe that issues are not there. But these issues still remain. And this basic survey has pointed it out. Let's try to decode the data. Now, first is water and where that water is, fresh water, accessibility to people. And what the first survey tells us is that 33.7% people, 33.7% households, the principal source of drinking water is outside the premises of their household. Basically, they don't have access to fresh water within their house. And herein comes where women have to go to wells, have to go to certain water sources, collect that water, store that water and bring with them. Now, this was something which we believed is universally accessible. We thought 10%, 20% households, 33.7% is a very big percentage of households which don't have access to water in their own premises. But if you look at the data state-wise, it is even more dangerous because you see, Orissa, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Andhra Pradesh, it is in 55 to 70% bracket, wherein close to 65% on an average, 65% of the households don't have water, drinking water, in their own premises. Now this is dangerous. Though there's a lot of disparity in the way it is there, there's a lot of what we call as range or spread, but there are certain states which still are struggling with this indicator. Now this is a problem. This is a problem because this shows us that when we come to sustainable development goals, when we come to basic HDI, this is not a very good picture. It's not a very good picture. So close to 1/3 of households in India, the principal drinking water source is outside their premises. And this means that women have to perform the task of collecting water, going and storing water. But in 7 states, more than 50% of the households do not have water in their own premises which they can drink. And as high as 66% in Odisha and 63% in Jharkhand, which is not a good thing. Now this is concerning, and this is a wake-up call for all of us. See, if you are thirsty, you go, open the tap, drink water. This is a very big privilege. 1/3 of households don't have this privilege. And in Jharkhand, Odisha, 66% of the households don't have this privilege. They go to a certain source, collect that water, store that water in their houses, and this is a daily task which they need to do. Now, if we talk about India going forward and actually meeting its sustainable development goals or even basic human development indicators, this is a problem. This is a major problem. And these states have always been vulnerable. The ironical part and the problematic part is these are also the states which are generally struggling, be it the Bihar, Orissa, the Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, this whole sector generally in human development. And now this is also showing us a major problem. 7 states, 50% people have something, 50% people don't have something. Now this is a major problem. But if we go one step further, you will also get to know that only 35.5% have reported to have access to piped water in their own premises. This means that if you go a step further and check if it's not drinking water but any other water source, only 35.5% actually have it within their house. This is also something which is a privilege to us today, that you go and open the tap and you get water. And again, Assam, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, now here West Bengal are problematic because here the coverage is only 10 to 30%, which is also not good. Now this is the problem. This data technically is not to be put into the examination, but these are major indicators which are problematic in the larger concept. So 35% of the persons in India have access to piped water, and Goa being the highest when it comes to 90%, and 6% in Assam. 6%. Meaning if you go to their house and you ask for piped water, 6% households only have piped water. Anywhere else there is no supply of water from the municipality or any other form of source. So when it comes to water as a basic indicator of existence, of health, it is not there. And we take these things for granted. We believe that India does not have this problem. So when we talk about access to fresh drinking water or piped water would mean that it is coming from certain source of municipality or any other source. It is technically very, very bad. And these states, Assam, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Orissa, have reported that they come under the 10 to 30% bracket. Now this is again something which should raise our eyebrows, and we need to take cognizance of this issue because this is a basic necessity of existence. If you go further, the access to clean energy. Now this again is a very important point. Access to clean energy, there has been a lot of advertisement, a lot of hue and cry that we have been able to give LPG access to women. They are now not into the hands of, or they are not now using traditional chulhas, which technically are first polluting and generally not good for the health of the woman. It causes cancer, lung cancer, quite common in women because of that reason. However, here again, 33.8% households still use firewood, the wooden chips, or crop residue to cook in India. Now this again is a very big number. Very, very big number. And if you look at the spread again, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, West Bengal, Jharkhand, 50 to 70% of the households still are using biomass and wood for making food. Now, this is the problem. As low as 6 to 7% in Telangana, but as high as 70% in Odisha. Now, this again is something which is dangerous. Because first, it is not the right clean fuel. Second, it is a health risk to the women and the household itself. It is a fire risk. And generally, when it comes to again sustainable development goal, which is access to clean energy, nothing. So, the basic point of the matter is when it comes to these indicators, we believe that there has been improvement. But when we talk about generally the concept of coverage, you see states like this. As I'm saying, this data is not to be put into the examination, but these are issues on which they will ask you questions in the essay or even GS paper 3 or 2. Because basically, the problem is that we tend to be non-cognizant of these issues. We tend to believe that this issue is gone. Schemes are there, but it doesn't mean that there is universal coverage. Because if there was universal coverage, Odisha would not be close to 70%. And if you go further, you see how many people, and it's a very interesting coverage, one whole page of the Hindu newspaper, how many people are ready to shift from their household for employment. 13.7% of persons are willing to move in search of employment. But again, if you look at the spread, close to 40% people from Uttarakhand, Chhattisgarh, Nagaland and Bihar sector, people are ready to move, and these are also the same areas out of which migrant labor is moving out. And basically, the states which are big and prosperous, the percentage is very low. However, where the states are struggling generally on the other indicators are also showing it here. So you can see that there's an intersectionality in these indicators. The same states in which the indicators are low are also the states from where people want to shift for employment or generally want to shift. Further, this is a very interesting one, which is that how many adults are indebted in India. This is something, a data which we generally don't see very, very often. How many adults per lakh are indebted to any institution or non-institutional agency. Now in this 15,809 people in 1 lakh. So in 1 lakh people, 15,809 people are indebted. But now you see the more interesting aspect. Karnataka, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, this number can be as high as 50% of that 1 lakh, which is close to 45,000 people, 50,000 people in the same 1 lakh, they are indebted. This is again not a good indicator because it shows that people, yes, have access to credit, but also means that there's some form of indebtedness, there's some form of fiscal burden on the household at that point of time. Now you see these indicators are very basic but grassroots level indicators which technically are linked to people's lives and basic indicators which are very important for HDI, which is human development. And therefore, if you have Andhra Pradesh where 46,000, you have Telangana 39,000, Kerala 31,000, Tamil Nadu 31,000. These are states in which people have taken a loan or credit, and the problem here is non-institutional agencies. A lot of them have not taken the money from institutions, which is banks, but rather money lenders. And this is again a basic problem in the way our credit system, financial system is working. Now, The most telling of all of them, is this one, which is percentage households which have an AC. 4.9%. In India, heat waves are becoming more and more common. In India, heat waves have now become a reality. February was the hottest month in the past 2 decades. And an AC which is seen as a solution also is also a problem in the sense of technically adding to the energy needs. 4.9%, 5% households. Imagine how long this road is when it comes to getting proper 50% coverage. 5% of the households in India, that too urban, have access to ACs in India. And with the general temperature rising, this is again a very telling story of how there will be a major crisis in this sector very soon. We have Goa, which is close to 22% coverage, but still that is not 50%. Though it is not a necessity, but it is seen as a solution for the general rising temperature. It's a slippery slope, it's not a solution fully. Coolers are used in India, but that too, the coverage is still very, very less. So when we come to the basic indicators, no real reality when it comes to the way India is developing at the grassroots level. But the last and the most interesting, this is the last point I want to discuss with you, and then we'll move on to the prelims section, is that how many people in India, and this is very interesting, very telling in that sense, how many persons above the age of 14 have the ability to copy and move a file or folder? Meaning, you have to just copy and paste and create a folder. This is IT skills, information technology skills. 24.6% of the people only know this in India. Today, we can't live without copy pasting. Only 24.6% people above the age of 14 in India actually have the ability to copy and paste. Now you tell me, where is our human development going? This is a basic thing, which you need to know in this world. Control C, Control V. Forget control and control. This is what is the basic IT level skills in India. Now this is also something not good. 50% in Sikkim, but generally the average is very less. So before I move to the Prelims Bytes section, I hope that you at least got an insight. This article is not about solutions and problems, it's about understanding what is actually on the ground. Let me generally give you an overview of what we've done till this point. We understood basic 3 articles. We first understood the concept of universal health, how it has been defined in this concept of governmental control in the primary level, and thereafter secondary and tertiary level left alone. And there is a need to reconceptualize how we understand universal health. Second, we tried to understand the concept of how we have one of the solutions when it comes to the LAC, which is no petrol zones. And this third is a window, a major insight into an NSS report, a governmental report, which gives us baffling data. People don't have access to water still, 1/3. People don't have access to piped water, 6% in Assam. People don't have basic IT skills. Still 1/3, close to 70% in certain states are using what we call as non-clean fuel for cooking. And generally when we talk about health indicators, education indicators, or generally we see all these indexes But this is the real grassroots level reality, that India still has a long way to go when it comes to water and energy and clean access to them. Right? Clear? Then we'll move into the smaller topics. These are prelims oriented topics rather than the ones we've discussed already. These three clear? Everybody? Clear? Two basic ones. One gives you a problem, other one gives you a solution, and third one gives you an insight into what is happening at the grassroots level. Okay. Now, this is an article which we see, and it's a very sad story for anybody who loves India's cultural heritage and art and culture, which is that India actually in this budget has allocated 0.075% of the budget to the Ministry of Culture, whilst in other developed countries such as China, UK, US, it's mostly in the bracket of 2 to 5%. Budgetary allocation to Ministry of Culture is 0.075%. 0.07%, not even 0.7%. Not 0.7%. No. It's 0.07%. Now, this is technically contradictory to how much heritage we have in India. India is one of the most diverse, culturally rich civilizations in this world. And this is the level of allocation we give to the ministry, which then gives the money to the ASI and other institutions which technically conserve and protect and preserve our heritage. And the basic argument, because there was a question which was raised in the parliament, and this was a question which was then again raised in a parliamentary committee, standing committee, that why is that we are only allocating 0.075%? And the answer to this question which the government has given, the officers have given, is that in these countries where the allocation is roughly 2 to 5%, it is coming from non-governmental sources. And more than that, the way India is today, their argument is that India has much bigger disparity when it comes to rural infrastructure, health, education, transportation. So it does not seem tenable, it is untenable to give a bigger proportion to promotion of art and culture. So what they're saying is that we have other things to look into. Our health, education and our transportation sector, rural infrastructure is much worse. Therefore, there's no way we give money and therefore allocate it to art and culture. So basically, the implied concept is we can't waste money on promotion of art and culture. This is the implied concept here. Now, as much as we can talk about it, as much as we can condemn it or we can criticize it, unfortunately, this is the grassroots level reality in India, that we have a wonder of the world, we have very rich culture, we have very rich tangible, intangible culture. But when it comes to budgetary allocations, very low, very low, very, very low, very low in that sense. And the argument is that only through non-governmental sources, which is NGOs, Aga Khan Trust and all, we can technically preserve this culture itself. And the government is trying and evolving innovative methods to maximize the participation of non-governmental organizations in conservation of art and culture. Now, I technically don't know what this line technically means, that we are trying and evolving. The basic point of the matter is India should be the last country to technically give so less in that sense, to be ignorant of its own art and culture, that we are not ready to even give 0.7%. 0.07%. And why it's a prelims concept? That basically they can ask you a question on, they can give you a basic question in which they can say that the budgetary allocation to art and culture or the Ministry of Culture is above 1%, is comparable, it's not comparable to anything, 0.07%. One of the lowest in that sense. Imagine how tight a budget ASI is going to work with. It has to discover a lot of different civilizations. It is excavating. Everybody's salaries go through that. Over and above that, they have to preserve. They have to preserve each and every monument which exists in India. And more than that, basic point of the matter is the solution which government is giving. Private participation is needed. Only non-governmental sources. So the justification is non-governmental is the answer. We will not be able to allocate. There are much bigger issues in India than actually protecting an art and culture. But they forget one thing, which is that once your art and culture is gone, then it's gone. If a type of intangible heritage becomes extinct, it's gone. You can't revive that back. So as much as health education is important, we believe and we should believe that preserving our cultural heritage is equally important, which we cherish so much. So, unfortunate part of our basic budgetary allocation, but it is sad but true. Thereafter, a new study which comes out of Kerala and talks about radiation. Now, why am I discussing this topic with you for your prelims? Because there are certain terms which are used in this basic article and they can be sprinkled around in the prelims examination. So, in Kerala, what we found is that the level of radiation, which is called gamma radiation, we have alpha, beta radiation, we have gamma radiation. Gamma radiation, which is there from the rocks, basic rocks of the Kollam sector and the other sectors of Kerala, it is quite high, but there is no risk. So now obviously you don't have to learn the data, but you need to know these terms. So in parts of Kerala, BARC, which is Baba Atomic Research Center, has found that the level of radiations which was thought of previously, 3 times more is there in certain districts of Kerala. And the gamma radiation, which can technically penetrate through any form of surface and basically is harmless if it is given in small doses or there is not too much exposure. But if it's concentrated exposure, can technically lead to radiation poisoning or radiation based genetic changes also. And the basic IEA, so the basic international accepted level of radiation which is accepted by everybody. Now this is why I am discussing this concept, is 1 millisievert. Now this is the basic unit of radiation. Please remember, because this can be sprinkled in GS paper 3 or generally in your prelims examination, and 30 millisieverts every year for anybody who's working in a nuclear power plant. Now, if you look at the basic indicators in Kerala, it is as of right now only 94 gray per hour, or what we call as 0.8 millisievert. However, what it was believed was that it used to be 0.3%. However, it is 0.8%. Still very less than what it is believed to be. And the basic point of the matter is that Kollam sector is showing the highest because of the monazite sands, which has thorium, and thorium will decay over a period of time, leading to radiation. However, generally southern India has this risk because of granite, basaltic and volcanic rocks which have certain amount of uranium in them. Now, why have we discussed this concept? Obviously, we are not going to go to a district level and understand it, though it is giving us a concept of first that generally monazite sand and granite and rocks which have certain amount of uranium can what we call as decay and release radiation. Now, this radiation is acceptable till 1 millisievert. However, in certain parts of column, it is close to it, 0.8. However, the major discovery as of right now is it is much 3 times higher than what we thought. And southern India, there is generally a tendency for higher level of radiation, and this is generally not good over a period of time. Over a period of time, because in that sense, we all are getting, in southern India generally, in peninsular India generally, are getting throughout their lifetime certain amount of radiation which may be absent in other parts of India. So this concept, 3 things for your prelims examination. First is this basic unit of radiation, sievert. Thereafter, monazite sands of Kollam sector has thorium. We already know the problem is thorium cannot be used in a nuclear reactor. You have to first break it down into plutonium and uranium. And basically, there is a tendency in southern India where the basaltic granite and the volcanic rocks have certain amount of uranium in them. Thereafter, Putin. Now, Putin has just yesterday landed into the Mariupol city in Ukraine. Now, why is this a major news? For 2 reasons. First, because they can ask you in the examination, prelims examination, in the context of geography or generally recently in the news, they can give you the city name, Mariupol. And you need to remember that Mariupol is a Ukrainian city. They can give you match the following. And this city is a major port city. So just hours after the anniversary of marking the annexation of Crimea, Putin then landed for the first time in Russia-occupied parts of Ukraine. And in the Donbas region, since February of 2022, this has been going on. And this very strategic port city was taken over after a very long standoff between the Ukrainian and Russian forces. And this is coming when Xi Jinping is going to make a visit to Russia in the next coming days. Now, this timing is very interesting. This timing is very interesting because China in itself is looking at the Russia-Ukraine crisis as with a lot of opportunity and is studying the basic impact, how technically economic sanctions don't work, how basically the world has responded to Russia taking over Ukraine. But for us, the basic point, simple point is this. Mariupol, remember this word, and it's in Ukraine. Your purpose, your basic purpose with regards to prelims examination is done. We don't have to go into any other detail. There will be a lot of cities over a period of time. We have been discussing a lot of cities related to Ukraine. Remember their names, because it is important that you remember their names, because they can be asked in the examination. They will give you 3-4 names and they'll ask you which country do they belong to. It's a very realistic question which can come in the examination. Thereafter, last but very interesting scheme, which is in UP, after finding a lot of leakages and generally finding problem when it comes to how certain schemes were working, UP has now developed, Uttar Pradesh has now developed the concept of family ID. And this was already there in Karnataka, wherein what they're doing is that they are technically going through a lot of different department resources, checking where there is doubling or there is gaps, and they're giving every household a family ID. So for example, what was happening in UP was that I was eligible for pension and I was also eligible for ration cards. However, I'm taking pension, but I'm not getting ration card. I have a ration card, but I'm not getting pension. There are certain departments in which you are registered. There are certain departments in which you are not registered. Therefore, family ID, the concept is that it brings everybody under the same ID. And if you are eligible for certain things, you will automatically become eligible for it in both the departments. It's a very innovative and very interesting and important grassroots level concept in itself, that basically Uttar Pradesh has been trying to boost the last mile delivery of welfare schemes in the state. In January, after going through 17 governmental departments, a 12-digit family identification number scheme has been introduced, in which they are tallying everybody's data for ration card, Aadhaar card, and technically giving them an identification number. If I am eligible for certain things, my family ID will automatically make me eligible for that. Currently, close to 3.6 crore families have already been given this ID, who have been registered within Aadhaar. Who are not under Aadhaar, they are being enrolled. But what is more important for you generally for the prelims examination is the fact that there is a Kutumba scheme, a Kutumba project in Karnataka, which is again trying to do the same thing, which is that it is trying to give a unique identity to the residents, and it serves as a repository for resident attributes and generally schemes at the last mile, and technically not allowing leakages. So before we go to the mains question, let's try to review what we've done till this point. We did 3 topics which were more conceptual. One, a problem, which was the concept of what we call as how we need to reconceptualize our understanding of what we call as universal health coverage, the Alma Ata declaration, the Beijing new declaration with regards to multinodal concept. Thereafter, we went to a solution to an issue which has been there, will always be there as of right now, which is India, China, and the LAC, which is that 6 zones are there, 2 zones are left. There are basic diplomatic discussions on the concept of using what we call as no petrol zones. And the third was an eye-opening experience for us, which is to see what is the grassroots level reality when it comes to clean water and energy and basic IT skills in India. Then we moved to the Prelims Bytes section, in which we discussed 4 basic concepts. I'll tell you the 4 things which you need to remember for the examination generally, and that should be enough for you. First, we tried to understand how the Ministry of Culture has been allocated only 0.07% of budget. Therefore, a very minuscule amount comparing it with other developed countries, even other sectors itself. Answer is non-governmental. Second, thereafter we understood the radiation concept, which is there in Kerala. A lot of districts are showing a lot of radiation, 3 times more than what we thought. Then we understood the concept of the Mariupol city, where Putin very significantly landed after celebrating the annexation of Crimea. And last but not the least is this 12-digit family ID code of UP, and the word which you need to remember is Kutumba project from Karnataka generally. And I hope that you understand these 7 topics comprehensively, and more or less you have an understanding of what we've done till this point. If you have, then we'll move to the mains question and end the session. Basic concept clear, everybody? Come on. Perfect. So, mains questions. We need to reconceptualize our understanding of universal health care. Comment. So it's a very straightforward question. How do we need to change it? Alma Ata, this is a very realistic question, GS paper 2 or 3. Question number 2. Recent NSS report data suggests India's path towards universal access to safe and clean water and energy is still several steps away. Discuss. Now in this question, remember, don't be too negative. Try to give them a solution. Try to give them a solution for the problems. But the basic point is, if you don't know the problem, you will not be able to write this answer. That is why this basic exercise we did was to understand the problem itself. So if all of this is clear, thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow with another set of issues. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. And remember, on Telegram, out of these 7 topics, there will be a quiz. Do like, share and subscribe to our Telegram channel and this channel if you're finding it useful. Thank you. Take care.